Welcome to Behind the Doors, the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of residential real estate investing. I'm your host, Dan Noma Jr., here with my co-host, Marvin Cruz.
We're here to help you unlock the best strategies and practice for investors. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned pro looking to scale your portfolio.
We've spent decades navigating the ever-changing world of real estate, and now we're sharing everything we've learned to help you succeed.
From off-market deals to cash flow management and everything in between, we'll break it down and bring you actionable insights that can make a real difference in your investments.
So get ready to open the door to new opportunities and take your real estate investing to the next level. Let's dive in. All right, we're back to Behind the Doors. Marv, we are here.
We
back
are here
on the couch.
And we got somebody awesome with us.
And we got another guest.
Oh, I'm so excited about this one.
I love it, man.
Yeah, buddy.
So today we've got Ramon Casaus. Is that how you say it?
Casaus.
Casaus.
It's close.
Casaus.
Casaus. Ramon is, I'll give my interpretation of Ramon, but obviously would love to hear yours when we're done. My interpretation is Ramon is kind of a jack of all trades in the real estate space, right?
Okay.
I've had conversations with Ramon about everything from building a team in like a real estate team to prop tech to real estate investment to like, it's eerie because it's almost like I'm talking to myself a little bit. He's kind of got a wide range of expertise and has been really successful in the space. So how do you describe yourself?
I mean, you took the words out of my mouth.
That's it.
He gave you the ultimate compliment.
Something like that. Yeah. I think a lot of it comes from getting in the business early on and starting an independent brokerage.
Yeah.
Because when you start something from scratch, just you, there's no parent company, there's no events, there's no like mentorship programs.
No playbook.
It's trial by fire, and so doing your best to educate yourself. And coming from New Mexico, I had to travel a lot to do that. So I'd been going to like Inman events since I was like my second year in the business. I'd go to them every year, and you just. Your network expands, your knowledge expands, sprinkling a little bit of time and experience, and here we are.
Nice. So I know you've got like teams here, you've got teams in New Mexico still. How are you guys structured? Like, what's the structure of the business look like right now?
Yeah. So started the like flagship location, which was in Albuquerque, independent brokerage. And then got up to about 60 agents, and we ran it like a team. So like, what's the team ridge, right? You've heard that term.
Yeah.
That's how we ran it. And I was already expanding into southern New Mexico and going in some other areas. And I was like, man, there has to be an easier way to do this. This is a lot. I don't know.
A lot of work.
Yeah. And so at the time, we ended up partnering with a national firm in 2020. And then around 2021, I was having my best year ever in real estate. I think a lot of us were. Yeah. Albuquerque is a great place, but I always just knew that I wanted to get into a more competitive environment, get around bigger players. And the most competitive environment I knew of was Phoenix, specifically Scottsdale. And so I packed up my truck and moved over and started another location. Yeah.
Nice. And so you still have the team there or just here too?
No, nice. The team in Albuquerque is still cranking, and they're doing great.
Love it, man. I love it. And I know recently, and I think that's probably like where we, our audience is probably most interested in, and I'm interested in hearing more about your investment side of the business, which seems recent, right? It seems that you just recently got a lot deeper into seller finance and, made more creative type financing that's possible, which is timely being with interest rates where they are. Well. So what made you get into this, and how do you start kicking that off?
I early on went to an event in Albuquerque. When I say event, a small meeting it's called Council of Exchangers. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No.
Long story short, it's a bunch of old school broker deal makers, and they're like trading RVs and swapping equity here and there, gold bars. I mean, the most creative stuff you can think of in real estate. And one guy took me aside because he saw that I was clearly like I looked like they were speaking Chinese to me. I'm like, I literally my first year in the business, I have no idea what you're doing. And he knew I knew nothing, and he explained to me seller financing. He's like, this is where you got to start. You understand this, you'll understand everything else. And he explained, that, hey, long story short, you can buy any property in any market at any price, any asset class. And as long as you and the buyer, you and the seller make an agreement, you can buy it. And there's no other check and balance other than that. And that opened up, kind of like Pandora's box, like, whoa, I thought I was limited, especially self-employed. In my first year, I thought I was limited to this traditional financing box. And he really opened my eyes to the possibilities. So I did my first deal in like 2017, 2018. And I've actually been doing it and representing clients because I just happened to know it and I studied it and I learned it. But like you mentioned, the interest rate environment changed. And so like, it was hard to get a deal done in like 2020 to 2022. I mean, virtually impossible. You could watch, in the MLS, all the properties that were marked seller may carry or owner finance considered. I mean, they just dropped off a cliff. And, but speaking about social media, I actually had been doing seller financing the entire time, but I never talked about it. And as someone who's done real estate content for a long time, I've never gotten more engagement and more people reaching out from all over the country than when I started talking about like what I would consider pretty basic single family seller financing deals. So I was like, well, shoot, I should probably talk about this more if I'm getting a bunch of leads. And
well, maybe some of our guys would be interested in this too.
Marv,
what do you know about seller finance?
Not as much as you guys do, but maybe tell us what separates your brokerage from other brokerages.
That's a good question. So I'm going to start with team because we're not technically a brokerage, but let's just talk about sales organization. Now, traditional real estate team, 80 to 90% of the revenue usually comes from the team leader and maybe their cohort of people that have been with them for a long time. And on the flip side, our organization does not operate around one singular individual. There is not one person that drives all the revenue. Fundamentally, each agent's individual success is what matters in our business. So whether I sell a property or not, it doesn't matter. Now, building it out structurally to be able to pour back into your team comes down to profitability. You have to have the right model to reinvest. But if I could break it down, it's super simple, is that it's not one person who's driving the team, who has all the business and connections, and you're trying to feed off of it. It's fundamentally the flip-flopped where each individual agent's partnership with our firm is what we focus on, and we pour everything back into them. And so I think that's like how I describe it.
No, I love that. I love that. You also have an Amazon #1 seller?
Well, yes, we did all the tricks and stuff back in the day to ramp it up.
No permission needed. Tell us about this book.
It was a book where I honestly got really excited about writing one because I was like, I never thought that'd even be a thing, and someone showed me a pretty easy way to get it done, and so I was like, okay. And they're like, yeah, like this is are people going to actually read it? Like, just being honest, statistically, no. But it's like, it's a credibility piece. And hey, if you got something you think is interesting to say, put it on paper. And it was more of like just when I got out of college and I got into business, I had a preconceived notion about like rules in business and entrepreneurship. I think a lot of that was framed in college. And once I got out there and started making money, I was like, oh, like some of these people don't really even know what they're doing, but they're just doing it. And these rules that you think are like they don't really exist. And so it was more of a book that I just shared like my entrepreneurial journey up until that point where, I just like, you don't need permission to do anything. You just go do it. And it was fun. Just, life lessons that I've learned at 5 years into entrepreneurship and real estate.
I love that.
I thought it was cool.
No, that's awesome. Thank you.
Nice. All right. Well, let's get into the seller finance stuff. Let's talk about this a bit. So I'm a real estate investor, right? What maybe I'm on the sidelines today as a result of interest rates, constraints. So that we have hundreds of clients like this, right? Where they are looking to buy a property. The property value is what it is. The rental rate is what it is. That's kind of a subjective number. But then you kind of throw in this jackhammer, which is their interest rate, right? So a property that used to pencil at when those two factors were what they were, now doesn't pencil as a result of the fact that my borrowing costs are too high. That's when you guys would kick in the idea of maybe looking for potential seller carry options.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the answer is in what you just said, right? Like, where do you find cash flow, especially in the single family space or even small multifamily? I mean, some could argue multifamily.
Yeah.
How can you find cash flow in today's environment? And I don't think traditional debt, unless you want to go, 30+% down is the option.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you start looking for seller carry options. And I like even on our own platform, we have customers ask us every day. They're like, hey, do you guys have any seller carry deals? Like, is there any opportunities there? So maybe like walk us through a deal, like in its simplest form, right? Just a simple deal. Like how would you start to look at it and evaluate a deal for seller carry?
Yeah. So first things first is I want to understand a couple key factors. One is I want to know a little bit about this person's situation. I'll just assume we'll get into that. We'll just assume we don't know.
Yeah.
Question number one, is there debt or no debt on the property?
Right.
So that's going to be the biggest hindrance of doing a deal, is depending on the debt structure they currently have.
And is there a preference? Do you have a preference?
Oh yeah, no debt.
No debt's the preference.
Yeah, because and even like in the sub-2 world and seller finance, anytime you're wrapping a prior obligation, I think that we do those deals, but there is an inherent long-term risk that someone like Jamie Dimon makes one phone call, and all of a sudden these come due. And so we have them in our portfolio, but our exit strategy is on a much shorter timeline horizon. So I prefer no debt, because there's no underlying notes. It's simply the agreement between the buyer and the seller.
Do you know like how many, like what the percentage of real estate properties that are floating around out there without mortgages on them is?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah. Can you look it up? Let's see. I wonder what it is.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it.
But I'd imagine that number is pretty high.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Like I bet it's higher than we think it is.
I think I would have to guess like upwards of 50%.
Yeah. I was going to say maybe 30 or 40% of all the properties in the country have a mortgage on them. Something like that.
Yeah, have a mortgage on them. Yeah. Right. So flip it around. Yeah. 50 to 60% don't.
Maybe, but I don't know.
That'd be my guess.
Yeah, let's find out.
That's why he keeps his laptop out.
Yeah. We can find all these.
Yeah, that's it.
We could find all this stuff out. But okay, so no debt.
No debt.
Okay.
Ideal.
Okay. Then what? So now where do I go? Yeah.
So, in these situations, like I always explain, there's kind of two types of sellers. Now there's obviously multiple, but pain and gain. And when you're dealing with someone who has no debt on the property, typically this is a gain scenario, meaning that the reason why they're going to consider a seller financing deal is because you're showing them a clear gain or advantage by doing this type of transaction with you. Opposed to in a pain situation, there's usually some type of financial pain that they are willing to get creative to rid themselves of the pain.
Right.
So in the scenario where you have someone who free and clear, it's a gain scenario. I mean, first and foremost, I'm going to look at what I think the actual value of the property is, because like I got to get, especially if I have a price or I have a range already, I want to know like how much is this thing worth? And then I need to look at the potential cash flow. And, if you're using some type of deal analyzer, like we need to, have some reserve, we need to account for vacancy, do all the things, right? Yeah. And then I'm going to look at, okay, what's it worth? What is the estimated monthly rent? And then what are my expenses going to be on that? And I'm going to just reverse engineer the math. Yeah. I'm going to go look at like, what could I pay for the property? So most people know a little bit about their liquidity, or they have some type of like rule, right? Like I only will put up to 10% down on a property. Okay. If I was to put that 10% down, that's what I'm comfortable doing. Well, then what interest rate do I need to make that PITI payment? Yeah. Like in the range where there's cash flow.
Yeah.
And I'll do this just over and over and over. And, I see like what my this is like super skinny, but I'd still do it. Here's what I'd be comfortable with. And here's what would be a slam dunk.
Right.
And I'm going to always go for the slam dunk, if not a little bit under that, to like hope it goes to the slam dunk. Yeah.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, all you're really doing is just backing into, and the variables like you talked about, you have your high, medium, low range. That's subjective to you, right? That's your risk tolerance.
Correct.
That's you saying, I want to make $200 a month. That's my minimum cash flow to do this deal.
Yep.
as opposed to maybe it's 1,000, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but you set that range.
Yeah.
There's no rule of thumb there.
Correct.
Right.
But however, I think like from a cash flow perspective, so a cash on cash, and then also looking at your IRR.
Yeah.
Because for me, if I'm looking at a decade long hold, like IRR is the number that really matters for my situation. So then you have to look at, what would I estimate the appreciation on this property to be year over year? I have to factor in what my expense increases are going to be year over year. And I have to factor in what my increases in my rental rate would be year over year. And then account for, depending on who you are, a 7 to 5% disposition fee, and really calculate like what's my net gain after 10 years of holding. But that number is what I'm most interested in, because I will weather a no cash flow deal for 3 years if I'm buying it way under market, because instantaneously, A, my net worth goes up the moment I buy it, but B, the IRR gets ridiculous after 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the entry point still matters, right? Like you're not going to overpay for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like you've still got to buy the property right. But like, talk to me about like when you're meeting with the seller on this. Like I like that with the way you phrase that. Like they're either trying to pain or gain.
Yeah.
When you're meeting with the seller directly on these opportunities, I assume that they probably haven't even thought about this yet.
There's an educational aspect. Yeah.
So you've got to take some time to like educate that seller to go, I can either give you $100,000 today, or I could give you, $2,000 a month for the next X amount of years.
Yep.
How do you get them comfortable with that, the trade-off for that?
Well, typically people want more, and myself included, than what our properties are worth.
Right.
That's typical. And so a lot of sellers, I'm like, there is a way I can get you your number. And we use the number to anchor, because if the number is important to you, then there's a way I can get you the number if you're open to a creative solution to do so. And if you're open to me talking a little bit more about it, and I can educate you, and you can ultimately make the decision that's best for you and your family, or you and your your financial plans, great.
Right.
And we take them down the educational process. An easy way also to phrase it is like, hey, would you be open to a down payment and paying you monthly interest? Just easy, put it out there and see how they react. Now, on the flip side of knowing like who the person is, we also want to know, I want to know a little bit about what their wealth building strategy is and how old they are. Because I call it tired landlords. I love dealing with clients or sellers who are above even the age of like 55, 60. And if you're going to sell this property and you're going to net $500,000 straight up, well, what are you going to do with the $500,000? Right? Put it in a checking account. Like that's not, most people are outliving their money. Right. And so it's almost more risky at that age to go place that 500,000. Like what are you going to do with it? Put it in the market? Like, why don't you let me give you an interest return on the equity that you've built in this property? Because you're comfortable with it, it, and I'm going to take great care of the property. I'm a professional landlord, right? So yeah, I could get into more of the details of the benefits, but that's like the high overview structure of kind of how we start getting into it.
What about from a contract perspective? What do folks need to be thinking about? Because this is foreign land for most folks. They go through the banks because they trust these documents, but there's differences here when it comes to seller's finance?
Technically you can write up an agreement on a napkin, right? But you do it on a purchase agreement that either you furnish or you have an attorney furnish, or if you're an agent or connected one, you can just use the standard forms. In most states, there is a seller financing addendum that we use that helps really spell out the details of the contract. So nothing too specific on that end.
Cool.
And the process is super easy because you're taking a lender out of the situation. And so literally it's just the paperwork at title. There's no funding, no qualification. There's no anything like that.
Yeah. So, if you're doing a seller finance deal, they're not like checking your credit. They're not, we had an insurance person in earlier and he was talking about the DTI and, all of that. None of this comes into play, right? This is strictly just a return and that's what they're looking for.
I never advertise that though, because like if I was selling a deal on seller financing to you and I didn't know you, I would for sure want to know more about like, where's your money come from? Like, give me some, you got credit. Do you have a foreclosure, an eviction? Like, but I would, in my career, I've been asked one time and I really just sent over an email explaining who I was. I've never been asked for a shred of documentation in all our seller financing deals. And I don't advertise that, but I do think it's something you should know, right?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So the rates, like the prevailing rate, I mean, are you trying to give them a rate that is just, at par? Are you looking at something that's like market value? Like how are you deciding what the rate is?
This is what I call a dance. And this is where it gets fun. Because a lot of times now we only do seller financing deals if there's a clear advantage. If there's no advantage, you want 20% down, you want market rate, and you want full asking price or retail value. I mean, there's really just no deal. If I was going to do that, just go to the bank. So we always say price, down payment, interest rate. There has to be a big win of one of those three categories and preferably two of the three. So when it comes to negotiating the interest rate, it's a dance because if I've framed up the benefits of seller financing to you and you're the owner of the property, I'm not only going to show you what 3.5% interest looks like, cash every single month and year and annualize. And I'm going to show you, if you're willing to hold this note for 10 years, Dan, here's the amount of interest I'm going to pay you in 10 years. And it's secured by this property. And so your purchase price of, $400,000 goes to like $525,000. And for a lot of people, that's attractive because they also get the mailbox money. It's truly hands off. So when you're negotiating, it's like, no, I want market rate. And I'm like, Dan, I don't think you want to do that. You're like, why not? Well, because this deal, where you win is you get the interest month over month, year over year. If you put me in a position at a market interest rate, I'm going to refinance the moment I can. Right. It's like you almost got to give me a little bit of a break here, so I stay in the deal longer. And the same can go with the down payment. Like, okay, you want to put me in an 80% or a 20% down market interest rate. The moment I can refinance, I'm going to. And that defeats the whole purpose for you.
Good point.
So, and this is the dance that we go back and forth on. You have to kind of change how they think about it.
And I mean, I assume that you're dealing with people that have never done this before, right?
Correct.
And so, I mean, that's the piece of this that I think is most interesting. Like, I understand the math and all of that, right? But like sitting at the kitchen table and negotiating with these people, I'm sure takes some time.
It takes some time, but also no one's kicking and screaming at the closing table. We're not forcing anyone to do this. And frankly, I think we've actually provided great retirement solutions for these people. And so there is almost an element of like, it's a lot of work and don't get me wrong, it's a good investment for me, but like, I actually believe in the instrument of especially in the older demographic. I believe in the instrument of selling your real estate on seller finance because you get that one more time to capitalize on the asset, and you're going to let the money sit anyway.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like why put it into another risky type investment? I mean, everything carries risk, right? But real estate is probably the least of those. I mean, I like to think of it that way, but
you keep all my payments, you keep my down payment, you take the property back if I don't perform.
Yeah, that's great. That's amazing. And so, I mean, I know like just recently, I've been following some of your social stuff. It seems like you've bought more recently. Are you guys targeting people that own their properties outright for cash? And is that why they uptick in the opportunities?
There's a couple. I mean, right now in the market, we're seeing a lot of situations where people bought, 2 years ago, and the market hasn't appreciated. If anything, it's even gone down a little bit. And so we're seeing a lot of pain situations right now. And a lot of those pain situations, they're losers on the Excel sheet. They're losers on the pro forma. So I always say, pick your losers wisely. We have taken on some projects where it's like, hey, we believe in this area. It's a kind of a blue chip area. We're willing to weather it out, but we get a lot of them that are in that. It's just the cash flow doesn't make sense. Your debt's too high. You have no equity. Like there's really not much I can do here.
Yeah, that's tough. What do you think happens to all that stuff?
I mean, a lot of it goes for rent. A decent amount of it goes to foreclosure, I think, at some point. And I think we're going to see more of that. But right now, I mean, you know, the biggest hindrance, and as an agent, this sounds really weird to say, but as an agent, the biggest hindrance is the agent, not because they don't know what they're doing, but because when you factor in 6% of fees, like if your property hasn't appreciated by 7%, you're underwater. And like, we're talking about like 2 to 3 is pretty like accurate annually.
Right.
If we, you know, spread it all out and take, you know, the pandemic out of the equation. So, a lot of times, you know, someone has to shave a fee and get creative with an end investor who comes in and,
Right.
I mean, that's just what it is right now. So I see a lot of that too. And I've helped facilitate them and I've bought some of them. And, you know, we always try to just give the best advice if we're not going to do it. It's like, here's what I would do if I was you.
Yeah. Marvin and I, in another episode, we had talked about seller finance, but really what we were talking about was like sub 2 deals, right?
Yeah.
And I've got an opinion of like, I struggle with the sub 2 deal from the point that you made earlier of just the fact that like I lose this one element of control of the opportunity. And then I wonder like what the long-term game is. There's guys out there that are doing hundreds of these deals right now, right?
Everywhere.
And when I always go back to the contract that the owner signed, and in that contract it says that, you know, if you sell this property, that, you know, you now have to pay the note, right? There's a due on sale clause. How do you think about that? And how, like, I know you said you've done a couple, and I know a bunch of great guys that are doing them, and I think there's a way to navigate them to make it okay. You know, how are you guys getting comfortable with that?
Yeah, well, you got to first just call a spade a spade. It's an inherent risk, right?
Yeah.
It's a risk you're taking on yourself, and frankly, you're kind of taking on the risk with the seller at the same time. The due on sale clause is a right to accelerate the note forward, not an obligation. And I think that's what a lot of people sometimes, you know, might be watching, like think that, oh, the moment it happens, it's automatic. No. It's not automatic. And 9 times out of 10, you know, you're paying the note on time, you know, everything's good on that, and you got your insurance straightened out. Theoretically, you shouldn't have any problems. But again, that's just subject to the future market.
Right.
And, what the future market holds. So the deal has to be really good, in my opinion. And I got to be in a situation where I believe I can refinance it pretty quick if I needed to. Yeah. Because when I'm holding these properties, like, you know, we don't really go under 10 years for a 10-year call date on the deal. So if we're going to go 10 years, I'm looking at some of these deals going, well, what if in 2 to 3 years or 4 years, like this happens, these notes get called forward. I'm okay taking a little bit of money out of pocket. It's not ideal, but like understanding what your true equity position is, because there could be a time where they're like, hey, this note's due and you got to act pretty quick. Right. And, hopefully the market didn't go down, because then you got to sell it and you're going to take a loss. But
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's and we all know the educators out there that are educating these guys on this stuff. And I just think it carries more risk than is being perceived out there. And, I don't know. I mean, we've just not been in an environment where any of these have really ever gotten called. Yeah. But at the time where a bank could profit from it, right? Let's say the note's at $100,000 and the property's worth $200,000. Yep. And you could call the note, and now you have a $200,000 property versus a $100,000 note at a higher interest rate too, right? Like you could relend that money back out at a higher rate. Like I don't know. I think at some point you continue poking the bear, and the bear might wake up and go, wait a minute, all we have got to do is compare deeds against all these properties, and we know. Yeah.
Create an asset management division. Let's take these things back. Right. I think
maybe they don't want to, right? Like, I don't know, it's just like, I don't know that
where it gets scary is, and I don't know what the like inflection point of true effect, but what I always thought about is if these mortgages are bunched up, collateralized, securitized, and then sold, mortgage-backed security, these are being sold upon the credit worthiness of the initial buyer. But that is now changing. Right. So like when you buy, you're buying these securities, that's a certain credit rating. Yeah. Well, if I bought the property and own it and I'm the one responsible for the payments now, that credit rating is subject to, it's just a guess at that point.
Right, yeah.
And I think to me, that's where I see like the problem long-term is enough of those creep into it's a large enough segment of the overall mortgage-backed security world. And now the data's off.
Right.
And people are selling things that aren't true. And that's kind of what happened, a while back, right? So I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on.
Yeah, they were like, "Oh, these are great loans. You should buy all these." Right?
Well, it's kind of funny. It's like, I'm going to sell you the loan. This person's then going to change hands with somebody else, and they're out of the picture. Like that doesn't sound very good.
Yeah. What we were talking about a few weeks ago is the fact that 70% of all mortgages that have been originated in the last 10 years are still owned by the federal government.
Wow.
Right. So you have like Chase, Wells, all the other banks, and then you've got Fannie and Freddie, and they carry 70% of all the mortgages, which is kind of mind blowing, right? You're like, dang, I thought that like my loan with Chase, was that everybody's loan was there. No, like they're not.
They're not. No.
The only people that have been buying mortgage-backed securities for the last, call it 8 years, really, is the federal government. And so that market is something that's hopefully it starts to lighten up a little bit too. But it comes to your point with the quality of the paper that they're selling.
Yeah.
And if you challenge that quality of the paper, it could get really interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Doors. We hope you found today's insights valuable for your real estate investing journey.
Remember, real estate success doesn't happen overnight, but with the right tools and strategies, you can build long-term wealth and create passive income.
If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with others who are passionate about real estate investing.
Don't forget to follow us on social media for more tips and exclusive content.
Until next time, keep unlocking new opportunities, and we'll see you on the next episode of Behind the Doors.